The evening sky was painted in soft shades of orange and purple as people hurried through the crowded streets. The city was alive with movement, cars honking, vendors calling out their prices, and tired workers making their way home. Among the crowd walked a single father, his steps heavy after a long day. His thoughts were already on his son, waiting for him at home, probably sitting by the window as he always did when his father came late from work. He adjusted the strap of his worn-out bag on his shoulder and sighed. Life had not been easy. Ever since his wife had passed away, it was just him and his little boy. Every day was a balancing act, working long hours, rushing to pick up his son from school, cooking simple meals, paying bills, and trying to stretch every dollar. He often felt like he was just one step away from falling apart, but he never let his son see that. To his boy, he wanted to be strong, the kind of father who could hold the world steady even when his own hands shook. As he walked past the corner near the bus stop, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another street vendor, but then he noticed it wasn't a stall or a table. It was just a small cloth spread out on the sidewalk with sheets of paper carefully placed on top. And sitting behind those papers was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 9 or 10. Her clothes were faded and her shoes looked too big, as though they were passed down from someone else. Her hair was tied into a messy ponytail, and her small hands rested protectively over the drawings in front of her. The sign beside her was written in uneven letters with a black marker, "Drawings for sale, to help pay for chemo." The father slowed his steps. He read it again, his heart sinking a little. The girl's eyes met his for a moment. They were tired eyes, too old for someone so young. Yet there was a spark of hope in them, as if she was silently asking every passerby for just a little kindness. People walked by quickly, some glancing at her, most ignoring her. A few shook their heads. Some smiled weakly but didn't stop. She didn't call out to them or beg. She simply sat there holding out her drawings when someone's eyes met hers, as though silently saying, "Please notice me." The father felt a tug inside him. For a brief second he thought about stopping, maybe buying one of the drawings, but then reality hit him. His wallet had only a little cash left after groceries and rent. He couldn't afford extras, not when his own son needed school supplies and food on the table. With a heavy heart, he lowered his gaze and kept walking, but as much as he tried to push the image from his mind, it stayed with him. The girl's small fingers smudged with pencil marks, the way she sat up straight, trying to look strong, even as her frail arms betrayed her weakness. The bold but shaky handwriting on the sign. He walked a few more blocks, telling himself it wasn't his responsibility. He had his own struggles. He was already stretched thin, but something inside him didn't agree. When he finally reached the bus stop, he leaned against the pole and let out a long breath. His thoughts drifted to his son. What if, God forbid, his boy was in that girl's place one day? What if life pushed them even harder, and his son had to sit out in the cold asking strangers for help? The thought made his chest tighten. The bus arrived and people shuffled in. He found a seat near the window and looked outside as the city moved past. But no matter what he tried, his mind kept circling back to that girl with the drawings. He imagined her sitting there in the chill of the evening, clutching her little pictures as people hurried by. He wondered how long she had been there. Did her mother know? Did she come every day? Did she go home with enough money for treatment? Or did she sometimes go home with nothing at all? When he got off the bus and began walking toward his building, his son came running out the door, full of energy, calling out to him. The father bent down, hugging him tight. His boy's small arms wrapped around his neck, and for a moment, the exhaustion of the day melted away. But as he held his son, the picture of the girl returned stronger than ever. That night after dinner, his son sat at the table drawing on a piece of paper with his crayons. The boy was laughing, proud of the stick figures he had made. The father smiled, praising the little drawing, but inside his heart grew heavier. He thought of the girl again, sitting on the cold sidewalk. Her own drawings laid out before strangers, not for fun, not for play, but for survival. The father lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling. His mind kept battling itself. He wanted to help, but how? He barely made it through each month. He couldn't risk his son's well-being. Still, he couldn't ignore what he had seen. Maybe he could buy just one drawing, he thought. Maybe that wouldn't break his budget. But then another voice inside him argued, what difference would that make? One drawing, one small note of money, would that really help? Or would it just be a drop in the ocean of her needs? He turned to look at his son, peacefully asleep. The little chest rising and falling, the tiny hand curled near his cheek. He thought about how children depended on adults for everything. For love, for safety, for food, for life itself. And then he thought of the girl again, sitting alone on the street, fighting something far bigger than her age should ever allow. Sleep didn't come easily that night. The father tossed and turned, haunted by the sign, the eyes of the little girl, and the silence of the crowd that had walked past her. The next morning, he woke up early, more tired than usual but determined to get through the day. He dressed for work, made breakfast for his son, and dropped him off at school. On his way to the office, he passed the same corner near the bus stop, and there she was again. The girl sat in the same spot, her little drawings neatly spread out. Today there were even more: bright flowers, a big smiling sun, a small bird flying in the sky. She looked up at him again as he passed, her eyes quiet but hopeful. She didn't say a word, but her hands gently pushed one of the papers toward him, as if inviting him to look. The father slowed down, his heart thumping. He wanted to stop, but once again the thought of his own tight budget pulled at him. He hesitated for a long second, then walked past, but this time it wasn't so easy to keep walking. The sound of the busy street faded, and all he could hear was the soft rustle of paper as the girl carefully laid out her work for strangers, who didn't seem to care. The father carried that sound with him the entire day. The next day felt heavier than usual. The father sat at his desk at work, staring at the papers in front of him, but his mind wasn't on the numbers or the reports. His thoughts kept wandering back to that little corner by the bus stop. No matter how hard he tried, the image of the girl sitting there with her drawings would not leave his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see her lifting those papers with trembling hands, trying to offer them to strangers who barely gave her a glance. He remembered the way she looked up at him yesterday, not with begging eyes but with a quiet strength, as though she had taught herself not to cry when people walked past without stopping. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. He told himself again what he had told himself yesterday: he could not afford to help her. He had bills waiting at home, a growing son who needed shoes, school fees, food, and 100 other things. There was no space for extras. His own life was already a struggle, but still, his heart felt restless. At lunchtime, while his coworkers joked and laughed around their meals, he ate silently, his mind far away. He thought about his son's laughter the night before, when he had been drawing at the table. That sound, so full of innocence, felt like a blessing. And then he thought about the girl on the street again. Did she laugh like that anymore? Did she even have the energy to? The father pushed his food away. His appetite was gone. When the day finally ended, he walked out of the office with his steps dragging. He knew he would pass that corner again. He didn't know if he wanted to. Part of him wanted to look the other way, to rush home and pretend he hadn't seen anything. But another part of him, the stronger part, wanted to know if she was still there. And she was. The little girl sat in the same spot, her drawings neatly arranged as though they were treasures. The sign looked the same, though the edges were now wrinkled from the wind. She had added a few new pictures today. One of them was a house with smoke curling from the chimney. Another showed a rainbow arched across the sky. She saw him coming and looked up again. Her eyes held his, steady and quiet. She didn't call out. She didn't wave her hands. She simply offered him a small smile, the kind of smile that said she didn't want to trouble him but still hoped he might stop. This time he couldn't just walk by. His steps slowed until he found himself standing right in front of her. He bent down slightly to look at the drawings. Up close he could see the pencil strokes, the uneven coloring, the effort behind each picture. They weren't perfect, but there was something honest about them, something that carried pieces of her little heart. "They're very nice," he said softly. Her smile widened a little, though her voice was quiet when she answered. "Thank you. I drew them yesterday." "I draw every night," he nodded, unsure of what else to say. For a moment the busy street around them seemed to fade. It was just the two of them, the man with tired eyes and the little girl with tired hands, both carrying burdens heavier than they should. "Do you like to draw?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered, almost shy. "I want to be an artist one day." But right now I draw because I need to. His eyes flicked to the sign again. For chemo? She lowered her head a little, her small fingers tracing the edge of one of the papers. Yes. The hospital says I need many treatments. My mom works a lot, but it's not enough, so I try to help. If people buy my drawings, maybe I can keep going. The father felt a lump rise in his throat. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of someone who had already lived through more pain than many adults. He wanted to reach for his wallet right there, but as he opened it, his heart sank. He had only a few notes left, barely enough for dinner and bus fare. He couldn't give it all away, not when his son depended on him. Still, he didn't want to leave her empty-handed. He pulled out one note, enough for a small meal, and handed it to her. "I'll take this one," he said, pointing at the picture of the rainbow. Her eyes lit up brighter than the drawing itself. She picked it up carefully as though it were made of glass and placed it in his hands. "Thank you," she whispered. The father nodded, trying to smile, though inside his heart ached. He tucked the picture into his bag and walked away, but he felt her gaze on his back until he disappeared into the crowd. That evening, when he got home, his son ran to him as usual. But instead of just hugging him, the father pulled out the rainbow drawing and showed it to the boy. "Look," he said. "What do you think of this?" The child's eyes widened. "Wow, did you draw this, Dad?" The father shook his head. "No, a little girl drew it. She's very brave. She sells her drawings to help her mom pay for her medicine." His son looked at the picture again, his small brow furrowed. "Medicine? Is she sick?" "Yes," the father said softly. "She's sick, but she's fighting very hard." The boy studied the rainbow one more time, then nodded slowly. "She's strong," he said. The father felt a strange warmth in his chest at those words. His son was right. That little girl was stronger than most people he knew. Later that night, after his son had fallen asleep, the father sat at the table staring at the rainbow drawing. He traced the colors with his finger and thought about the girl's quiet smile. One small purchase, one small note of money. It wasn't enough to change her world. But maybe it wasn't about changing everything. Maybe it was about showing her she wasn't invisible. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Was that really all he could do? Buy one drawing and walk away? Was that kindness or just a way to ease his own conscience? He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. In his heart, he knew the truth. This wasn't the end. Something inside him told him he would see her again, and next time, he wouldn't just walk away with a picture. He didn't know what he could do yet, but he knew he had to try. The rainbow sat on the table, catching the soft glow of the lamp. It looked simple, almost childlike, but to him it felt like more than just a picture. It felt like a promise, a reminder of a little girl's strength and a choice he couldn't avoid much longer. And as he finally went to bed that night, he realized something. Sometimes the heaviest battles are fought quietly, on sidewalks where nobody wants to look, with nothing but a pencil and paper. And sometimes the smallest gestures could mean everything. The following days moved slowly, but the little drawing of the rainbow never left the father's mind. He had placed it carefully on the wall near the kitchen table, where his son could see it every day. Whenever they sat down for breakfast or dinner, his son's eyes would wander to it, and almost always, he would ask something about the little girl who had drawn it. One morning, as the boy was chewing on a piece of toast, he asked, "Dad, do you think she's still out there?" The father looked up from his cup of tea. "I think so. Do you think anyone else bought her drawings?" The boy continued. His voice was soft, as though he was worried about the answer. The father smiled faintly. "I hope so." The boy nodded slowly, then said, "She needs help, right? Maybe we can help more." The father's chest tightened. Out of the mouths of children often came the purest truths. His son didn't know about money struggles, about overdue bills, about the way his father sometimes had to choose between paying rent or buying new shoes. The boy only knew what his heart told him, that someone needed help and they should give it. That thought stayed with the father as he left for work that day. And when evening came, he found himself walking a little faster toward the bus stop. His eyes searched for her before his feet even reached the corner. And yes, there she was. The little girl sat on the same piece of cloth, her small body hunched slightly as she arranged her papers. The stack looked thinner than before, which gave him a flicker of hope. Maybe some people had bought her work today. Still, The way she sat with her shoulders heavy told him it hadn't been enough. He walked closer, and once again her eyes lifted to meet his. This time her smile came a little quicker, like she recognized him. She held up one of the drawings without a word. It was a picture of a bird, wings spread wide, flying across a sky filled with uneven blue strokes. He bent down to look, and she whispered, "I drew this one last night. I was thinking about flying away from hospitals." Her words were so simple, but they sank into him like stones into water. He could imagine her sitting in a hospital room, surrounded by machines, hearing doctors speak in voices far too serious for her age. And in those moments, she had chosen to escape with her pencil, to create wings where none existed. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. She shrugged a little, as if embarrassed. "I don't know if people want it. Sometimes they just walk by. Sometimes they don't even look." He stayed quiet for a moment, then asked gently, "How long have you been doing this?" "Since the doctor said I needed more treatments," she answered softly. "My mom tries very hard, but she can't do everything. So I thought, maybe I can help too. I don't like asking people for money. But if I give them something, maybe it's not just asking." Her reasoning pierced his heart. A child shouldn't have to think this way. A child should be playing, laughing, running, not worrying about medical bills. But here she was, making sense of a world that had given her too much to carry. He reached into his bag and carefully took out the rainbow drawing she had given him the day before. "Do you remember this one?" he asked. Her face lit up. "Yes, you bought it. I put it on my wall," he said. "My son loves it. He says you're very strong." The girl's lips parted in surprise. For a second her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked quickly, not wanting them to fall. He said that?" "Yes," the father nodded. "And he's right." The girl looked down at her lap, and for the first time he saw her small shoulders tremble. She wasn't crying loudly. She wasn't making a scene. She was simply letting a few tears escape, quiet and honest, as if no one had told her in a long time that she was strong. The father wanted to say more, but he felt his own throat closing up. Instead, he gently picked up the drawing of the bird and handed her some money, more than he should have spared. She hesitated before taking it, as though unsure if it was too much. But when she finally accepted, she whispered, "Thank you." As he walked away, the drawing of the bird tucked safely in his bag, he felt something inside him shift. He had thought he was only helping a child with her treatment. But now he realized he was giving her something she desperately needed, the reminder that she was seen, that her efforts mattered, that she was not invisible in a world that hurried past. That night, back at home, his son's eyes widened again when he saw the bird drawing. "Did she give you another one?" "Yes," the father said, setting it on the table. The boy studied it for a long time. Then he looked up at his father with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, can I do something?" "What do you want to do?" "I want to draw too," the boy said. "And maybe we can sell my drawings with hers. Then she'll have more money for her medicine." The father's heart swelled. His son didn't have much, but he wanted to give anyway. That was compassion in its purest form. The next day, after school, the boy sat at the table with his crayons, filling page after page with simple drawings, houses, smiling suns, little stick figures holding hands. When he was done, he stacked them proudly and said, "Can you give these to her?" The father promised he would. And so, after work, he returned once again to the little corner. The girl looked up, surprised to see him 3 days in a row. He bent down, handed her the stack of drawings, and said, "These are from my son. He wanted you to have them, to sell together." The girl's mouth fell open slightly. She touched the papers with careful hands, as though afraid they might disappear. He did this for me." "Yes," the father said quietly. "He wanted to help." For the first time, her face broke into a full smile, not the small, polite one she usually gave, but a true smile that lit up her tired eyes. She pressed the stack of drawings against her chest and whispered, "Tell him thank you. Thank you so much." The father nodded, feeling his throat tighten again. As he walked away, he realized something else. Kindness wasn't about the size of the gift. It was about the heart behind it. His son, with nothing but crayons and paper, had given this girl more hope than most adults who walked past her. And deep down, the father knew he couldn't stop here. Something inside him told him this was only the beginning. The girl's struggle was far from over. But maybe, Just maybe he could play a part in making her burden a little lighter. That night, as he tucked his son into bed, he told him how happy the girl had been to receive his drawings. The boy's face lit up with pride, and he whispered, "Then we'll keep helping, right, Dad?" The father looked at his son's hopeful eyes, then at the two drawings hanging on their wall, the rainbow and the bird. And he answered without hesitation, "Yes, we'll keep helping." Outside, the night sky stretched wide and endless. Somewhere in that same city, the little girl sat with a small pile of drawings, clutching not only paper and pencils, but also the fragile gift of hope. And that hope was enough to keep her going for one more day. The week went by slowly, and each day the father found himself drawn back to that little corner near the bus stop. What began as a moment of hesitation had now turned into something he couldn't ignore. Every evening, when work ended and the sky dimmed, he would stop by to check on the little girl. Some days she looked tired, her head resting against the wall, her hands weakly holding up her drawings. Other days she seemed brighter, her small smile quick to appear when she saw him. And every day she had new pictures, sketches of flowers, animals, suns, and skies. One evening, as he stood there looking through the stack, he asked quietly, "Do you draw all these by yourself?" She nodded. "At night after homework? Sometimes at the hospital too, when I wait for the doctor." Her voice carried no complaint, only a quiet acceptance, but the father could hear the weight behind it. A child shouldn't have to think about hospitals and treatments. A child should be dreaming about playgrounds, not bills. He bought another drawing that day. This time it was a simple picture of two hands holding each other. When he asked her what it meant, she said softly, "It's me and my mom. She holds my hand every time I'm scared." Those words clung to him the whole night. He thought about his own son, how the boy always slipped his hand into his whenever they crossed the street, trusting him completely. That small hand meant everything to him. It reminded him that his boy still felt safe in this unpredictable world. But then he thought of the girl's mother, working endless hours, fighting to save her daughter while knowing time and money were both against her. That woman must have been carrying mountains on her shoulders, yet she still found the strength to hold her daughter's hand. The father felt a deep respect for someone he had never even met. Over the next days, the father's visits became a quiet routine. He would buy one drawing, sometimes two, never saying much, but always staying a little longer than before. His son began asking more questions each evening. "How was she today? Did she smile? Did she like my drawings?" The father would answer with patience, always sharing little details because he knew his son's curiosity came from a good place. And every night, as they looked at the growing collection of pictures on their wall, something inside both of them felt lighter. But as much as the drawings brought warmth, the father knew the truth. Small purchases wouldn't be enough. A few notes of money could not cover hospital bills that stretched into thousands. He wrestled with this thought every day. What could he do? How much could he give without risking his own son's future? The answer wasn't clear, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. One Friday evening, as he was about to leave the office, his manager called him in. He explained that the company was struggling and that overtime hours would be cut. The father nodded quietly, but inside his heart sank. Those extra hours had been his lifeline. Without them, things would tighten even more at home. On the bus ride back, he stared at his reflection in the window. The thought of the girl flashed through his mind again. If he was barely hanging on, how was she surviving? How was her mother managing? When he reached the corner, she was there, but this time she looked paler than usual. Her head was lowered, her hands limp by her sides. The drawings were still laid out neatly, but she wasn't offering them to anyone. People passed without stopping, the usual indifference filling the air. The father knelt down beside her. "Are you okay?" She looked up slowly, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Just tired," she whispered. He felt a rush of worry. She was too young to look that drained, too young to carry that kind of weight. Without thinking, he reached into his wallet and pulled out more money than he could spare. He placed it gently on the stack of papers. "I'll take all of them today," he said softly. Her eyes widened. "All of them?" "Yes," he said firmly. "All of them." For a moment she just stared at him as if unsure whether to believe it. Then her lips trembled and tears filled her eyes. She covered her face with her small hands and began to cry quietly. The father stayed there, letting her take her time. Finally she lowered her hands, her cheeks wet but her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. You don't know what this means, he gave her a gentle nod. Just keep drawing. Don't stop. Your pictures matter. That night, when he returned home with an armful of drawings, his son's eyes went wide with amazement. The boy helped him spread them across the table, one by one, marveling at each picture. Dad, the boy said suddenly, why don't we show these to more people? What if other people want to buy them too? The father paused, looking at his son's bright face. It was a simple idea, yet powerful. Maybe he couldn't cover everything on his own. But maybe, if more people saw the girl's drawings, if they knew her story, they might want to help too. That night, long after his son had gone to bed, the father sat at the table surrounded by the drawings. He thought about the sacrifices he had made, the money he had handed over, and the risk it brought to his own household. Yet strangely, he didn't feel regret. He only felt the weight of a bigger choice pressing on him. He could keep buying quietly, helping her survive day by day. Or he could do something bolder, something that might change the course of her fight altogether. But bolder meant risk. Bolder meant stepping into the unknown, when his own life was already fragile. He stared at the picture of the two hands holding each other, the one the girl had told him was her and her mother. He thought about his own son's hand, small and trusting in his, and he realized the truth. Sometimes being a parent wasn't about safety. Sometimes it was about teaching your child that compassion was worth more than comfort. The father leaned back, his decision slowly forming. He didn't know exactly how he would do it yet, but he knew he couldn't stay silent. He couldn't just be one man buying one drawing. He had to be the one who gave her story a louder voice. Because what if no one else stopped? What if everyone kept walking past, pretending not to see? As he drifted into restless sleep, the stack of drawings still scattered across the table, one thought echoed in his heart. Tomorrow, he would do more. He didn't know how much it would cost him, but he knew the choice had already been made. The next morning, the father woke earlier than usual. He couldn't shake the feeling that today had to be different. The decision he had made the night before sat heavily but clearly in his mind. He would do more than just buy a few drawings here and there. He would find a way to make a real difference for the little girl. He dressed quietly so as not to wake his son. In the kitchen, he poured himself a cup of coffee, staring out the window as the city slowly came to life. The streets that had always felt busy now seemed full of possibility. Somewhere out there, people were walking past the little corner, unaware of the child who needed help. Today, he would change that. After a quick breakfast, he left for work, but his mind was elsewhere. He planned to stop by the corner on the way as he always did. But this time he brought something extra. A folder, neat and clean, filled with pictures of the girl's drawings. Each one carefully arranged, ready to show someone who might care. When he arrived, the girl was already there. Her small body was hunched, her eyes tired, but when she saw him, a flicker of hope crossed her face. "Good morning," he said softly. "I brought something." She tilted her head, curious but cautious. "What is it?" He opened the folder and laid it gently on the ground. "These are your drawings. I thought maybe someone else should see them too." Her eyes widened as she looked at the neatly arranged pages. "People will see them?" "Yes," he said, "and some of them might want to help. Really help." She gasped softly, her small hands reaching out to touch the folder as if afraid it might disappear. "Do you really think they will?" He nodded. "I know they will. You just have to let them." For a moment they both sat quietly, the noise of the street fading around them. He could see the spark of hope growing in her eyes, the way her hands gripped the folder like it was a treasure. And for the first time, he felt certain that today would be a turning point. After work, he went to a small community center he knew about. He showed the girl's drawings to the staff, explaining her story carefully, making sure to focus on her courage, her talent, and the urgent need for help. The staff was moved. They had seen many cases, but rarely someone so young, so determined, trying to fight for her own life with only pencils and paper. Within hours, word began to spread. The community center shared the story with local families, friends, and volunteers. Soon people were coming to the corner where the little girl sat, not just to buy a drawing, but to ask about her treatment, to ask how they could help. When the father returned that evening, he found her surrounded by people, some kneeling down to see the drawings, others offering small envelopes of money, flowers, or kind words. The girl looked overwhelmed, her small hands barely able to manage the papers. But she smiled, a real bright smile, one that reached her eyes and made her cheeks glow despite the fatigue. The father watched from a little distance, a mixture of relief and pride swelling in his chest. His own son, who had followed him after school, tugged at his sleeve. "Dad," the boy whispered, "look." "She's happy." "Yes," the father said quietly. "She really is." As the days went by, the support grew. People shared her story on social media. Local businesses donated money for her treatment. A group of volunteers even offered art supplies so she could continue drawing while in the hospital. The father stayed nearby, guiding his son in how to help without overwhelming her, teaching the boy the meaning of kindness, courage, and generosity in real time. One afternoon, the father brought his son and the girl together at the community center. He watched as they carefully arranged the drawings for a small exhibit, hoping to inspire more people to help. The girl, for the first time, looked around and saw that her struggle was not hers alone. There were hands, big and small, ready to hold her up. "Thank you," she said softly to the father, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to say it." "You don't have to," he replied gently. "Just keep drawing. Keep being you." Her smile returned, stronger this time. She didn't hide it. The tears that had once been quiet now came freely, because she finally felt safe enough to let them. The father put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "See, people do care, and you're going to be okay." Months passed. The treatments were still challenging, but the little girl no longer faced them alone. The money raised by the community covered her hospital bills. Friends, strangers, and neighbors became part of her extended family, checking in, encouraging her, and celebrating small victories along the way. Her drawings, once hidden on a small cloth on the sidewalk, now hung in classrooms, libraries, and local galleries. Each one told a story of resilience, hope, and courage. People admired not just the art, but the heart behind it. The father watched it all quietly, proud but humble. He had taken a risk, stretching his own resources and comfort, and it had changed everything, not only for the girl but for his son, and even for himself. He realized that sometimes helping someone else did not take away from your own life. Sometimes it expanded it, filling it with meaning and connection that money could never buy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, the father and his son walked past the corner where it all began. The little girl waved at them, holding a new sketch she had just finished. Her smile was wide, her eyes bright. She ran a few steps toward them. "Look," she said, "I drew this for you." The father knelt down and took the drawing carefully. It was a picture of a hand holding another hand, surrounded by stars and a glowing sun. "It's beautiful," he said softly. The girl's small face lit up. "I wanted to show you that I'm okay. Because you helped me." The father's eyes blurred with emotion. "You're more than okay. You're amazing." His son looked at the drawing and then at the girl. "See, we made a difference," he said proudly. "Yes," the father whispered. "We did." The little girl laughed, a soft but joyful sound that seemed to echo across the street. People walking by smiled, some stopping to admire the drawing in her hands. It was as if her courage had lit up the world around her. The father felt a gentle warmth in his chest. He realized that the tears she had shed when he first bought her drawings were not just hers. They were the tears of everyone who had ignored her, everyone who had walked by too quickly. And now those tears had transformed into something beautiful: hope, kindness, and community. From that day on, he continued to support her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And he knew that his son was learning something far more important than numbers, grades, or toys. He was learning that compassion and action could change lives, even when the odds seemed impossible. The little girl never forgot him or his son. And the father, who had once hesitated to help because of his own struggles, learned that giving, even when it felt impossible, was the only choice worth making. Years later, the father would remember that small corner, the frail little girl, and the first drawing he had bought. He would remember how a single choice, an act of quiet courage, had set off a chain of love and support that changed not just one life, but many. And sometimes when he walked past that corner, he would see a child holding out drawings to strangers and remember the day he realized the power of simply seeing someone, believing in them, and choosing to help. The city moved on. People came and went, but the memory stayed with him, warm and steady, a reminder that one act of kindness could ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. And the little girl? She kept drawing, always drawing, with a heart full of hope and a life full of possibilities. Her courage never forgotten, her smile forever bright. Months had passed since the little girl first sat on that street corner with her drawings. What once was a lonely fight had grown into a story of hope that touched the lives of many people. The father and his son continued to visit her, but now their visits were filled with laughter, excitement, and planning. The little girl's health had improved, thanks to the support from the community, and she was gaining strength both physically and emotionally. The father often thought about how small acts could lead to big changes. Just a few drawings, a few notes of money, had set off a wave that reached far beyond what he could have imagined. And the boy, who had once only offered his crayons and pencils, now understood what real kindness meant. It was not just giving, it was standing with someone, believing in them, and helping them rise when the world had pushed them down. One day, the father brought his son to a local art show organized by the community center. The little girl's drawings were displayed proudly alongside the works of local artists. People came from all over the city to see them. Some stopped to admire her skill. Others asked about her story, the courage that had carried her through months of treatment. The girl stood beside her drawings, smiling shyly as she explained to visitors how each picture was made. She talked about the nights she spent drawing after school, the time in the hospital when she waited quietly for her treatments, and how hope had been the one thing that kept her going. The father watched from a distance, a lump forming in his throat. He remembered the first time he had seen her, frail and alone, holding out her drawings on the street. And now here she was, standing tall, sharing her story with the world. His son tugged at his sleeve. "Dad," the boy whispered, "look at her. She's not afraid anymore. She's happy." "Yes," the father replied softly. "She's stronger than we ever imagined." As the day went on, more people approached, offering to sponsor her art classes, buy her drawings, or help her in small ways. She began to understand that her creativity had value, that her voice mattered, and that her struggle had not been in vain. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of control over her life. She was no longer just a little girl with a disease. She was an artist, a storyteller, and a symbol of hope. Later that evening, the father and his son walked with her to a nearby park. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the playground. The little girl skipped along, her laughter echoing, carrying a sketchbook filled with new drawings. She stopped occasionally to show them something she had just created. A tree with roots that reached deep into the ground, a small boat sailing on a bright blue river, a sun that seemed to glow with warmth. The father knelt beside her. "Your drawings are amazing," he said. "Do you know how many people you've inspired?" She shook her head, smiling shyly. "I don't know. I just wanted to help myself. And my mom." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done so much more than that. You've helped everyone who has seen your courage. You've taught people that even when life is hard, there is hope. And hope is more powerful than anything." The boy nodded. "See? You helped me too. I learned how important it is to care, really care, about someone else." The girl looked at him and smiled. "I'm glad you did. You didn't have to, but you did." That night, the father lay awake in bed, thinking about how much had changed. The little girl had become a part of their lives, and they had become a part of hers. He realized that kindness was not a one-time act. It was a chain, one link connecting to another, spreading beyond what anyone could measure. He thought about the people who had come to help her after seeing her drawings, the volunteers who donated time and supplies, the strangers who had stopped to listen. Each act, no matter how small, had made a difference. Weeks turned into months, and the little girl's progress continued. Her treatments became less frequent as her health improved, but she never stopped drawing. Her sketches became more detailed, more imaginative, reflecting her dreams and her renewed energy. People from the community continued to support her, and she began sharing her work with local schools, inspiring other children to draw and express themselves. The father noticed how his own son had changed as well. The boy was more patient, more understanding, and more aware of the struggles others faced. He had learned that helping someone did not mean losing anything. It meant gaining compassion, empathy, and understanding. Together, father and son had found a way to make the world a little brighter, and the lessons they had learned stayed with them every day. One afternoon, As the three of them walked through a local market, the little girl stopped at a small booth and picked up some colored pencils. She turned to the father and his son. "I want to try something new," she said. "I want to make a big drawing that tells everyone's story, the people who helped me, the people who inspired me." The father smiled. "That's a wonderful idea. You'll show the world how much love there is." She nodded, her small face full of determination. "I want everyone to know that even when life is hard, people can still care about each other." Over the next few weeks, she worked tirelessly on the big drawing. The father and his son helped her, offering ideas, holding the paper, and giving encouragement. People from the neighborhood came to see her progress, sharing stories, asking questions, and sometimes adding their own touches of color. The project became a community effort, a symbol of what could happen when people chose kindness over indifference. Finally, the day came to unveil the drawing. The community center organized a small event, inviting everyone who had been part of the girl's journey. The father and his son stood beside her as the large canvas was lifted into place. It was breathtaking. The drawing told a story of struggle and hope, of courage and compassion, of a community coming together to lift a child from fear into light. Tears filled the father's eyes as he looked at the work. The little girl's talent and bravery were clear in every stroke, every color, every detail. His son held his hand tightly, sharing the emotion silently. Around them, people whispered and nodded, some dabbing at their eyes, others smiling broadly. The little girl turned to the father and whispered, "Thank you. You gave me a chance. You showed me people can care." He knelt down and hugged her gently. "No, you did it yourself. You never gave up. You kept going, and everyone else just followed your courage." The event ended with applause, and many people approached to offer continued support. Some wanted to volunteer, some wanted to buy drawings, some simply wanted to tell her story to others. The ripple effect had grown far beyond the father and his son, far beyond the little corner where it had all begun. As they walked home that evening, the father reflected on how a simple act, buying a few drawings, had turned into a movement of love, care, and hope. He realized that every person who chose to see her, to believe in her, had made a difference. And in that moment he understood something he had always felt but never fully grasped. True change begins with one choice, one small act of kindness, and one person willing to believe. At home, the father and his son hung the big drawing on the wall next to the rainbow and the bird. The room felt brighter, warmer, and full of stories. His son looked up at him. "We really did help her, Dad, we really did." "Yes," the father said, smiling, his heart full. "And she helped us too. She taught us how important it is to care." The little girl, sitting nearby with her sketchbook, added a few more small touches to her drawing. She looked up at them and said softly, "I'll never stop drawing, and I'll never stop hoping, because hope is stronger than fear." The father nodded. "And we'll never stop believing in you." The son smiled, reaching for the girl's hand. "And we'll always be here." Outside, the city moved on, people rushing past streets and corners, but in one small home, there was a reminder that courage, compassion, and hope could change the world. One little girl, one father, one boy, and a community of people had proven that even the smallest actions could ripple far and wide. And somewhere, in the quiet of the night, the little girl held her sketchbook close, her heart full of gratitude, her mind full of dreams, and her life full of possibilities. She was no longer alone. She was not invisible. And she knew, with a certainty that only those who have fought and survived can feel, that kindness, courage, and hope would always find a way. The years that followed the community event changed everything. The father, his son, and the little girl had become a symbol, not just for the power of art, but for the impact of a shared community. People had come together in ways they never imagined. They had seen a little girl's strength, and through her they had found their own. The act of kindness that had started with a few drawings had grown into something far bigger than any of them could have predicted. The little girl, now stronger and healthier, continued to draw, but her art had evolved. What had once been simple sketches of trees, flowers, and birds now reflected her growing understanding of the world. Her drawings told stories of hope, resilience, and the beautiful connections she had made. She had been given a chance at life, and she wanted to share that gift with others. It wasn't just her art that had grown. Over time, the girl became a mentor to other children facing their own struggles. The community center offered art workshops where kids could come and create. The little girl would lead these workshops, sharing not just her talent, but also the lessons she had learned. She spoke of the importance of perseverance, of finding beauty in even the darkest days, and of the people who had come together to support her. One day, after one of her workshops, the father sat quietly in the back of the room, watching his son, who had now grown older, sitting beside the little girl. The boy had taken on the same quiet strength his father had shown him. He no longer looked at the world with innocent eyes, but with a maturity that came from seeing how deep human kindness could go. The father couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he watched his son, so comfortable in the presence of the girl, offering his support and encouragement. Over the years, their bond had become something unspoken yet so strong. What started as an act of compassion had created a friendship that transcended age and circumstance. As the years passed, the girl's health remained stable. She no longer needed to visit the hospital as often, and the treatments had become less frequent. What had once been a frightening and uncertain journey had become one of hope, not just for her, but for everyone who had supported her. Her medical bills, once a constant source of anxiety, were now a thing of the past. The money raised through the community effort had not only covered her treatments, but it also allowed her family to live without the constant fear of financial strain. One afternoon, as the father was walking with his son to the park, he paused and looked around at the people gathered. Families, friends, and strangers stood together, all of them sharing in a collective joy. The community had become something far more than just a place to live. It had become a place of connection, a place where people cared for each other and where no one was left behind. "You know, son," the father began, looking at his son with a smile. "When we first met that little girl, I had no idea how much our lives would change." His son nodded. "I know, Dad, me neither. But I think we were meant to meet her. I think we were supposed to help." The father's heart swelled with pride. "You're right. And look at how many people have been helped because of it." They walked in silence for a moment, taking in the warmth of the day. The father thought about how the world often felt like a place where people were too busy to notice each other, too absorbed in their own lives to see the struggles of those around them. But then he thought of the little girl and how, by just seeing her, by choosing to take action, everything had changed. Years ago, she had sat on that street corner holding out her drawings, hoping someone would notice her, hoping for a chance. And now she had a life full of hope, full of opportunities, and full of people who cared. Her story had rippled outward, touching lives in ways they couldn't have imagined. But the father also realized that their part in the story was far from over. The lessons they had learned were ongoing. Compassion, kindness, and the simple act of seeing someone, truly seeing them, had the power to change everything. That evening, after the workshop, the girl came to find the father and his son. She had something important to say. She had been invited to an art show in a nearby city, a place where artists from all over could showcase their work. It was a big opportunity, one she had dreamed of for a long time. "I want to go," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "I want to show my work. I want to show everyone what I've learned. I want to thank everyone who's helped me." The father looked at her, his heart full. "You've come so far," he said. "You've earned this. We'll all be there to support you." And so, with the community's support, the girl prepared for her big day. She worked tirelessly on her art, pouring all the lessons, all the emotions, and all the gratitude she had felt into each piece. She painted, drew, and created with a sense of purpose that was beyond her years. She knew that this was more than just an opportunity to show her work. It was a chance to share her story and to thank the people who had been there for her when she needed them most. The day of the show arrived, and the girl stood proudly by her artwork. The father, his son, and the rest of the community were there, cheering her on. As people walked through the exhibit, they stopped to admire her work. Some were moved to tears, some simply smiled with pride, but all were touched by the strength and resilience reflected in every brushstroke and pencil line. It wasn't just her art that stood out, it was the story behind it. The people who had seen her rise from a place of fear to a place of hope stood with her, and the room was filled with a quiet understanding that something beautiful had been created here, not just in the paintings but in the hearts of everyone involved. As the show came to a close, the girl stood by her work, surrounded by those who had supported her. She looked at the father and his son, and with a shy smile, she said, "Thank you. You gave me a chance. You gave me a future." The father placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave yourself a future. You never gave up even when things seemed impossible. You are an inspiration." And in that moment, the father realized that the journey they had all been on wasn't just about saving one life. It was about creating a community, a world where no one had to face their struggles alone. As they left the show that evening, the father couldn't help but think about the years ahead. There would be more challenges, more struggles, and more opportunities to help. But now he felt a sense of peace. He knew that the kindness they had shown each other would continue to spread, touching lives in ways that would echo long into the future. As they walked home under the stars, the father looked at his son. "You've learned something important, haven't you?" The boy smiled. "I have, Dad. I've learned that even small things can make a big difference, and that when you help someone, it helps you too." The father nodded. "Exactly. That's the power of kindness." They continued walking side by side, knowing that the world could be a better place, one act of kindness at a time.